You walk into the dealership for a routine oil change, expecting to pay a few bucks and be on your way. An hour later, the service writer walks out with a clipboard, a grave look on his face, and hands you an estimate for $1,400 in urgent, immediate repairs. Does that sound familiar? You have been lied to, upsold, and manipulated by an industry that profits massively off your lack of mechanical knowledge. The ugly truth that car manufacturers and shady dealerships desperately want to hide from you is that modern cars are heavily engineered to survive just past factory warranty period, and not a single mile further. They want you back in the showroom buying a new vehicle, completely convinced that cars simply naturally die at 100,000 miles. Today, we are tearing up that false narrative and exposing the brutal, unfiltered truths that will make your vehicle sail right past the 300,000-mile mark. We are throwing out the generic owner's manual fluff and diving straight into the hardcore daily habits and maintenance secrets that lazy drivers ignore and greedy mechanics prey upon. Stick with me through this whole conversation, because I am going to save you thousands of dollars in easily avoidable repairs. Let us start by addressing the single biggest scam happening right inside that dealership service bay. I'm talking about the multi-point inspection trap. Service writers are not your friendly neighborhood mechanics. They are commissioned salespeople heavily pressured to hit monthly revenue quotas. I have seen the behind-the-scenes meetings where these guys are explicitly trained to push unnecessary fuel injector cleanings, premature brake fluid flushes, and throttle body services on cars that barely have any miles on them. If someone tells you that your brake fluid is completely black and dangerous, demand that they physically walk you out to the shop floor and show you the reservoir. 9 times out of 10, that fluid is a perfectly healthy amber color. You do not need a $400 fuel system flush at 30,000 miles. Do not ever blindly authorize a repair out of sheer panic. Your best financial defense is to find a trusted, independent mobile mechanic who does not have an aggressive service manager breathing down his neck. Ask for photos of the worn components. Ask for the exact manufacturer specifications that justify the replacement. And always get a second opinion before you accidentally fund the dealership manager's next vacation. Now, let us talk about the lifeblood of your engine and the absolute worst piece of advice printed in your owner's manual. If you are strictly following the manufacturer's recommended 10,000 to 15,000 mile oil change interval, you are slowly and silently murdering your engine. I have torn down countless engines that supposedly had perfect dealership maintenance records following that exact high mileage schedule. Inside, I found thick, black, baked-on sludge coating every single moving part, like burnt lasagna. Piston rings were completely frozen, camshafts were deeply scarred, and the microscopic oil passages were choked solid. That massive mileage interval is a marketing gimmick designed to lower the advertised cost of ownership on a spreadsheet. In the real world, where you deal with short trips, stop-and-go traffic, and hard winter startups, your engine oil chemically breaks down and loses its protective additives way before the 500-mile mark. My absolute golden rule for anyone who actually wants to keep their car long-term is to change conventional oil every 30 miles and full synthetic oil between 50 and 70 miles max. Yes, a quality synthetic oil change might cost you around $40 if you do it yourself in the driveway, but spending that small amount right now absolutely beats handing over $4,000 for a complete engine rebuild in 3 years. Even with fresh oil, your morning routine might be tearing your cylinder walls to shreds. We need to kill the myth of the morning warm-up idle right here and now. You probably think that letting your car sit in the driveway idling for 15 minutes on a cold morning is safely warming up the engine. That is not warming it up. That is subjecting it to a slow, agonizing death. When your engine is cold, the fuel injection system runs incredibly rich, meaning it dumps extra gasoline into the combustion chamber to keep the engine running. When you just sit there, idling, that unburned liquid fuel washes directly down the sides of your cylinder walls. It completely strips away the crucial microscopic film of engine oil, and then it seeps down into your oil pan, heavily diluting your expensive synthetic oil and turning it into a useless, thin sludge. Oil temperature actually rises about 8 times faster when the vehicle is moving under a load compared to just sitting idle. If you want your engine internals to survive past 250,000 miles, you start the car, wait exactly 30 seconds for the oil pressure to stabilize, and then you simply drive the car gently for the first couple of miles. Real mechanical protection happens when the vehicle is moving, not when it is parked. Speaking of keeping things moving smoothly, we need to talk about a hidden killer that slowly destroys your suspension and your fuel economy. Stop treating your daily driver SUV or crossover like a heavy-duty commercial dump truck. Every single extra pound you haul around in the trunk puts massive exponential stress on your structural components, especially during hard cornering and emergency braking. A car's chassis and suspension are exactly like the foundation of a building. If you put too much constant, uneven weight on the structure, the whole foundation begins to crack and warp. What's me? I have had customers pull into the shop with their crossovers absolutely stuffed to the roof with heavy toolboxes, bags of concrete, and junk they haven't used in months. Months later, their rear shocks are completely blown out, their coil springs are sagging permanently, their control arms are bent out of shape, and their tires have chopped. Uneven wear patterns. That little hauling habit quickly turns into a $1,400 suspension overhaul. Open your driver's side door and look at the sticker inside the jam to find your gross vehicle weight rating. Subtract the actual curb weight of the vehicle, and whatever number is left is your true payload capacity. Remember that every passenger inside the car eats into that number. Unload the heavy golf clubs, take the unused tools out of the trunk, and travel light. Your shock absorbers will thank you, and you will save a fortune at the gas pump. While we are discussing the gas pump, let us fix a catastrophic fueling habit that is destroying a highly sensitive, wildly expensive emissions component in your car. When you are filling up your gas tank and the pump handle violently clicks off for the first time, you need to pull the nozzle out and walk away. Stop squeezing the handle 3 or 4 more times just to round up the price on the screen to a perfect even dollar. That extra click is not getting you more driving range. It is physically forcing raw liquid gasoline down the vent lines and directly into your evaporative emission system, specifically your charcoal canister. Your gas tank absolutely requires empty airspace at the very top to properly vent expanding fuel vapors. When you overfill the tank, that raw liquid floods the charcoal pellets inside the canister, completely ruins the vapor sensors, and permanently clogs the purge valves. I have pulled down evap canisters that were so saturated with raw gasoline that they weighed 10 pounds more than they should have. You are looking at a completely unnecessary repair bill ranging anywhere from $350 to $900 just to fix the damage caused by your obsessive need to squeeze an extra 50 cents of gas into the pipe. When the pump clicks, the tank is full, period. But what happens when that tank gets low? This brings us to another fuel-related trick that separates cars that last forever from cars that end up on a tow truck. You must strictly follow the quarter tank rule. I know that gas prices are incredibly frustrating, and sometimes you just want to push it to payday. But constantly driving around with your low fuel light glaring at you is a lethal habit. Your electric fuel pump sits submerged at the very bottom of your gas tank. It is not just sitting there. It actively relies on the surrounding liquid gasoline to act as a thermal coolant and a fluid lubricant for its internal electric motor. When you run the tank down to absolute fumes, that pump starts sucking in hot air. The internal windings overheat rapidly, the rubber seals dry out and crack, and the motor eventually burns itself alive from the inside out. I have had to drop gas tanks to replace completely fried fuel pumps on cars with less than 80,000 miles on the odometer. That is a $600 repair completely wasted because the driver liked to play Russian roulette with the fuel gauge. Furthermore, the very bottom of your gas tank is where all the heavy rust, dirt, and sediment naturally settle over the years. When you run the tank dry, the pump sucks all that abrasive gunk straight into your fuel filter and your delicate fuel injectors, causing rough engine idling and horrible acceleration. Treat the quarter tank mark on your gauge as your new absolute empty line. Let us shift focus to the transmission, the second most expensive component in your entire vehicle, and the one wrapped in the most dangerous lies. The biggest lie the dealership ever told you is that your automatic transmission has lifetime fluid. There is absolutely no such thing as a lifetime automotive fluid. Modern transmissions are incredibly complex, highly pressurized hydraulic systems packed with sensitive solenoid valves and friction clutch packs. Unlike engine oil, you don't generally burn off transmission fluid so it stays sealed inside, quietly breaking down and turning highly acidic mile after mile. By the time you hit 60,000 miles, that fluid is a nasty cocktail of worn clutch dust, microscopic metal shavings, and thick varnish. It basically turns into liquid sandpaper grinding aggressively through your planetary gears. If you wait until the transmission actually starts slipping or shifting hard, you are completely out of luck. You cannot fix mechanical wear with fresh fluid. You are looking at replacing a massive chunk of metal that will cost you anywhere from $3,000 to $7,500. The secret is to perform a simple drain and fill procedure every 60,000 miles. However, there is a massive exception to this rule. If you have bought a heavily neglected used car with 150,000 miles on it, and the transmission fluid has never once been changed, do not ever let a shop perform a high-pressure chemical flush. That heavy sludge might actually be the only friction material providing grip for the worn-out clutch packs. Flushing it out will cause the transmission to slip instantly. Just drain the pan and refill it with the exact original equipment manufacturer fluid. Put Toyota VUS in a Toyota. Put Honda ATF in a Honda. Never use generic cheap fluid in a transmission. Let us transition to something simpler but equally critical. How you actually bring the car to a stop. Stomping aggressively on your brake pedal at the last possible second is not a sporty driving technique. It is a massive idiot tax for lazy driving. Every single time you execute a harsh panic stop from high speed, you are hitting your metal brake rotors with massive heat spikes that can easily exceed 1,000 degrees. This intense thermal shock instantly boils the brake fluid in your calipers, completely glazes the friction material on your brake pads, and physically warps the heavy iron brake rotors. When your steering wheel shakes violently, every time you press the brake pedal, you are feeling the expensive result of your aggressive driving habits. If you want your braking components to last twice as long, you need to change your visual horizon. Look a quarter mile down the road. If you see a traffic light turning red in the distance, simply take your foot entirely off the accelerator pedal and let the heavy mass of the vehicle coast naturally. Use the engine's natural vacuum to slow the car down. This simple shift in driving awareness will literally double the lifespan of your rotors and pads, keeping hundreds of dollars in your pocket. And when you finally do need to replace them, do not buy the cheapest white box parts from the auto store. Cheap pads chew violently through metal rotors and squeal constantly. Pay for quality ceramic pads now, or pay for an entire brake job again in 6 months. Now, let us talk about a completely free mechanical fix that involves a habit you perform every single time you park. You probably pull into your driveway, slam the shifter into park, let your foot off the brake, and feel the entire car heavily roll forward and violently bounce against the transmission. You think the P on your shifter stands for a magical parking brake. It absolutely does not. Inside your incredibly expensive transmission is a tiny, fragile metal finger called a parking pawl. It is roughly the size of your pinky finger. When you park on an incline without setting your emergency brake, you are forcing that tiny piece of metal to hold the entire 3,500-pound weight of your vehicle all by itself. It is not designed to be a heavy-duty load-bearing brake. It is merely a gear holder. When that tiny pawl eventually snaps under the immense stress, your car is going to roll straight down the hill and into a tree, and you are going to be staring down the barrel of a $2,800 transmission teardown just to retrieve the broken metal shards from your gear set. I do not care if the road is perfectly flat or if your car was built yesterday. Your parking routine must be precise. Keep your foot firmly on the brake pedal. Pull the emergency brake handle up tightly. Put the transmission into park and then release the foot brake. Let the heavy steel cables of the emergency brake hold the weight of the car, not the fragile internals of your transmission. While we are discussing the physical foundation of the vehicle, we need to address the structural integrity underneath you. Washing the shiny paint on the top of your car while completely ignoring the undercarriage is basically vehicular suicide. A car's frame is its absolute structural foundation. If you live in an area that uses heavy road salt in the winter, or if you drive near the ocean, that corrosive salt mixes with road grime and moisture to create a highly aggressive acid that eats raw steel for breakfast. I have put cars on my hydraulic lift that looked absolutely pristine from the outside, but when I walked underneath them, the subframes were so heavily rotted that I could literally punch a hole straight through the metal with a standard screwdriver. Brake lines get eaten alive, fuel tanks rust at the seams and leak, and structural control arms turn into crumbling crust. One harsh winter can easily kickstart a permanent corrosion cancer that you cannot reverse. You must aggressively protect your investment. Once a month in the winter, or after driving on heavily salted roads, you need to find a high-pressure hose and blast the entire undercarriage, getting deep inside the wheel wells and behind the suspension components. Do not skip this during the rainy spring season either. because wet mud trapped in the frame rails acts like a wet sponge holding moisture directly against the metal. You are fighting a constant war for the structural health of your car. Let us get back under the hood and talk about the cooling system, because heat is the ultimate engine killer. The coolant flowing through your engine block does not just keep you warm in the winter, it prevents the engine from literally melting itself into a solid block of scrap aluminum. Modern engine cylinder heads are heavily precision machined from lightweight aluminum, and they absolutely hate extreme heat. If your engine coolant temperature gauge ever spikes up into the red zone, you do not have 10 minutes to limp the car home. Aluminum cylinder heads will severely warp at around 230 degrees Fahrenheit. One stubborn driver ignored his rising temperature gauge for just 8 minutes while driving on the highway. The extreme heat physically warped the cylinder head, violently blew the head gasket, and instantly mixed the engine oil with the coolant, creating a thick, milky sludge. That stubborn decision resulted in a catastrophic $3,800 repair bill. If that needle hits the red zone, you pull over immediately, shut the engine off completely, and call a flatbed tow truck. To prevent this nightmare entirely, you need to flush your engine coolant every 3 to 5 years. Because the anti-corrosion chemical additives break down over time, allowing rust to clog your radiator. And never, ever mix different colors of coolant. Check your owner's manual and use the exact specific chemical formula required, or you will turn the fluids inside your engine block into a corrosive gel-like science experiment. If you ever notice that your coolant reservoir is slowly dropping, you are dealing with a silent assassin. Coolant does not naturally evaporate in a healthy, sealed system. If you find yourself adding a splash of fluid every couple of weeks, you are not maintaining your car. You are just blindly babysitting a slow, catastrophic death. Some drivers will top off a slow leak for months, completely unaware that a failing head gasket is secretly leaking coolant directly into the combustion chamber, seam cleaning the cylinders, and destroying the engine block. Sometimes the leak is external, like a hairline crack in the plastic radiator end tanks, or a weeping water pump bearing. Sometimes it is hidden deep inside the dashboard, with a failing heater core quietly soaking your carpet. You cannot just guess where the fluid is going. You need to pressure test the cooling system. With the engine completely cold, you attach a manual hand pump to the radiator neck. Pump it up to the exact pressure specified on the radiator cap, and physically watch the pressure gauge. If the needle slowly drops, you have a leak, and the forced pressure will usually push the fluid out exactly where the hole is, making it incredibly easy to find. Catch the killer early, before it leaves you stranded in the middle of nowhere with a smoking engine bay. Speaking of catching problems early, let us talk about the mechanical language your car uses to communicate with you. Your car constantly speaks to you through vibrations and noises. If your vehicle starts sounding like a heavy metal percussion section, you cannot just turn the radio volume up and pretend everything is fine. Every single clunk, whine, squeal, and ticking sound is a desperate cry for mechanical intervention before a complete structural failure occurs. A simple, high-pitched squeal from under the hood is usually a $40 serpentine belt telling you it is dried out and slipping. Ignore it and that belt will eventually snap, violently wrapping itself around your cooling fan and instantly killing your alternator and water pump, leaving you stranded with a massive repair bill. A heavy, rhythmic clunking sound coming from the front wheels when you turn sharply is a failing CV axle joint begging for grease. Ignore it, and that axle will violently snap at highway speeds, destroying your transmission casing in the process. If you hear a rapid ticking noise coming from the top of the engine that gets faster as you accelerate, pull over immediately and check your oil dipstick. That sound is usually your hydraulic valve lifters screaming because they are completely starved of oil pressure. Track the noise, figure out exactly when it happens, and diagnose it immediately. Another diagnostic trick that can literally save your transmission from shaking itself to death is something I call the engine mount death test. Engine mounts are heavy rubber and metal isolators that bolt the vibrating engine block securely to the vehicle's frame. Yay! Over the years, the rubber dries out, cracks, and completely tears apart. Because it happens slowly, most drivers just assume their car is getting older and naturally vibrating more. It is not natural. It is highly destructive. When an engine mount snaps entirely, the massive torque of the engine causes the whole block to literally lift up and slam violently back down against the metal frame. This immense twisting force will tear your exhaust manifold clean off, rip your intake hoses, and bend your transmission shift brackets. to check this right in your driveway. Set the parking brake firmly. Put your left foot incredibly hard on the brake pedal. Shift the transmission into drive, and briefly rev the engine up to about 2,000 RPM with your right foot. Have a friend stand safely to the side and watch the engine under the open hood. If the engine block jumps violently up more than an inch, your mounts are completely destroyed. Replace them immediately with high-quality OM rubber mounts. Let us add a brand new trick to your arsenal, one that dealerships conveniently forget to mention because the fix is too cheap for them to make a profit. I am talking about cleaning the lungs of your engine, the mass airflow sensor, and the electronic throttle body. As your car sucks in thousands of cubic feet of air from the road, a thin layer of microscopic carbon, dirt, and oily residue slowly coats the delicate heated wire inside your MAF sensor and the butterfly valve in your throttle body. When the MAF sensor gets dirty, it sends heavily skewed, inaccurate airflow data to the engine computer. The computer responds by dumping the wrong amount of fuel into the cylinders, killing your fuel economy, and causing a sluggish, delayed throttle response. When the throttle body gets caked in thick carbon sludge, the valve cannot close properly, resulting in a rough, surging engine idle that feels like the car is about to stall at red lights. Dealerships will quickly quote you a massive bill to entirely replace the throttle body and the idle air control systems. The real financial education here is that you can fix this entire problem yourself with 10 minutes of effort. Go to the auto parts store, buy a $10 can of specific mass airflow sensor cleaner, and a can of throttle body cleaner. Carefully remove the sensor, spray the delicate wire without touching it, wipe the carbon out of the throttle body flap with a clean rag, and reassemble everything. The return on investment for that $10 spray is massive, immediately restoring your lost horsepower and smoothing out your idle perfectly. We also need to talk about the physical geometry of how your car rolls down the street, because skipping wheel alignments and tire rotations is a fantastic way to burn through your cash. Your suspension relies on highly specific angles, camber, caster, and toe to keep the flat tread of the tire perfectly planted on the pavement. Puddles, speed bumps, and natural suspension wear slowly knock those precise angles completely out of specification. If your alignment is off, you are essentially dragging your heavy tires sideways down the asphalt. This creates massive rolling resistance, severely dropping your miles per gallon because the engine has to constantly fight the friction. Worse, it aggressively grinds the rubber right off the edges of your tires. You will find yourself replacing a $1,200 set of tires in half the time they were rated for. Furthermore, because the front tires carry the heavy weight of the engine and handle all the steering friction, they wear down much faster than the rear tires. If you never rotate your tires from front to back, you will be forced to buy pairs of tires constantly, instead of replacing a full, evenly worn set years down the line. Get an alignment check once a year and rotate those tires every time you change your oil. Finally, let us talk about the electrical heart of your vehicle. Corroded battery terminals are the ultimate silent killers of your expensive electrical components. Pop your hood and look closely at the lead posts on top of your battery. If you see a thick, fluffy, white or blue acidic crust building up around the metal clamps, your car is quietly suffocating. That acidic corrosion creates massive electrical resistance. When you turn the key to start the car, the starter motor violently demands hundreds of amps of electricity. Because of that heavy crust, the starter has to work twice as hard to pull the power through the resistance, overheating its internal coils. Meanwhile, your alternator is constantly overworking itself trying to force a charge back through that corroded connection into the battery, shortening its lifespan dramatically. I have seen cars towed into the shop completely dead, with the owner absolutely convinced they needed a $900 starter replacement. 10 minutes with a cheap $5 wire brush and a simple mixture of baking soda and water to neutralize the battery acid, and the car fired right up like it was brand new. Scrub those terminals clean down to bare metal every few months. Tighten the clamps securely and spray them with a heavy coat of dielectric grease to permanently block oxygen and prevent the corrosion from ever coming back. If you meticulously apply every single one of these brutal truths, you will not just keep your car running. You will build an indestructible machine that effortlessly sails past 250,000 miles, keeping a massive amount of cash firmly in your wallet.